Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, January 11th, 2021, and today we're going to be taking a look at the 2020 midterm elections and talking about why the Democratic Party could lose the House of Representatives, as many incumbent parties do when they have an opposition party with a lot of energy on their side. It happened in 2018 for the Republican Party. It happened in 2010 and 2014 for the Democratic Party. So in 2022, we could see the Democratic Party effectively lose the House of Representatives, and win the United States Senate. This is actually something that occurred back in 2018, just with roles reversed. The Democratic Party was able to win the United States House of Representatives, picking it up from the Republican Party, gaining a total of 40 seats. In the United States Senate, however, the Republican Party was able to gain a total of 2 seats and retain control of the United States Senate. So it was actually sort of a flipped victory. It was pretty interesting, though, because the Democratic Party did win the popular vote in the Senate elections by 20 points, but then again, there weren't Senate elections in every single state. On the House of Representatives level, it's actually this actually shows a 7-point victory for the Democratic Party, but the final numbers report an 8 to 9% popular vote victory for the Democratic Party. So looking at the 2018 House of Representatives results, the Democratic Party was able to win the House, and the Republican Party gained seats in the United States Senate. And I honestly think this is actually a very likely scenario heading into 2022. The House of Representatives seems to be one of the first things that would be gone for the Democratic Party. This is the narrowest House majority, I believe, since the 2000s, early 2000s. I think maybe 2000 or 2002 was the last time that we saw Congress as close as it currently is. And the Democratic Party only holds a majority of roughly 4 seats. You need 218 for control. They have 222. There's only one outstanding race now that Iowa's 2nd congressional district was called today for the Republican. Look at that margin of victory: 196,964 votes for the Republican, 196,958 votes for the Democrat, a margin of 6 votes in a House district. The Republican Party won there, one of the closest House races in United States history. And New York's 22nd district is also experiencing a very similar thing, except the Republican Party is ahead by 12,000 votes here out of roughly 300,000 votes in total. So exceptionally close, but right now the Republican Party leads. And that would actually put the Republicans at 213 if everything holds, giving them a very substantial victory over the Democratic Party, flipping a total of 15 seats from different political parties, whether independent, whether libertarian, whether Democrat. Overall, the Republican Party went from, at a point in 2018 at 199 seats all the way up to 212, and the Democrats dropped from 235 to 222 with an only 4-seat majority in the United States House. But the Senate elections, I think, could actually fare better for the Democratic Party entering into 2022. If we actually characterize all of the states that voted for Donald Trump, you will notice that he doesn't actually bring the Republican Party to an outright majority in the United States Senate. In fact, he doesn't bring them to a majority whatsoever. Based off of the map from the 2020 presidential election, if the Democratic Party were able to win all of the states that Joe Biden did, their majority would actually expand. Their majority would go from 50 seats all the way to 52 seats. But obviously, that's all speculation. We would have to see that in action in order for us to draw this very big conclusion. But if the Democrats are able to do that, it'll go from a point of being a 50-50 tie in the United States Senate all the way up to a 52-48 majority, something that the Republican Party is all too familiar with. So looking at this 52-48 majority, it would honestly not be the worst case scenario for the Democratic Party, but I really don't expect the Democratic Party to do much better in the House of Representatives, even at all, because also, not only will the House map be somewhat more favorable for the GOP because of the year itself, just history tells us it's probably going to be a Republican wave year. It's yet to be seen, but it's sort of understood to call that the initial conclusion. But redistricting is something that will occur. Now, if you aren't aware, every 10 years we fill out the United States Census in order for each state to get a certain number of citizens for population and redistricting purposes. Every 10 years they also provide us with a brand new electoral map. They also provide us with a brand new House of Representatives map. What does this mean? It means that the commissions in these states will redraw the congressional boundaries, which in turn would actually make it so both political parties have the ability to gerrymander depending on who is in control. Now, in 2018, the Democratic Party was actually able to pick up a number of governorships. They gained 7: Nevada, New Mexico, Kansas, Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, Maine. but Republicans still hold supermajorities in some of these states in terms of state legislatures, enough so that Democratic vetoes wouldn't be enough to shoot down congressional gerrymanders. Now, not to say that the Republican Party would be the only party to do so, but the Republican Party will likely be the party that benefits heavily, considering they control the most amount of seats in the United States map in terms of redistricting control. So all of that red and all of that blue are the standard colors that you're used to. Red and blue obviously characterizing Republican control, Democratic control over who is able to draw different districts. The yellow stands for split or bipartisan control. This means sometimes the governor will be able to veto a Republican legislature in a case for a Democratic governor state, or vice versa. My state, Maryland, has a Democratic supermajority, so Republican Governor Larry Hogan couldn't veto that. But in the event that he could, well, that would be considered a bipartisan state. So there are a pretty considerable amount of bipartisan states in total here. I think I'm counting a total of 9. Nebraska, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Louisiana, Hawaii, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Maine. But looking at the green states, if you're wondering what that is, no, it does not mean a Green Party candidate is winning there. It means it's an independent redistricting commission, which means that they will be taking an independent more, as much as they can be. There's always going to be some type of outside influence, but they generally are more fair in terms of drawing districts and a lot easier to actually understand than Republican or Democratic drawn districts, just because many of those districts drawn by partisan legislatures will always end up in a gerrymander. Sometimes these don't actually end up that way. But as you can see, the Republican Party still is able to dominate some of the more populous states: Texas, Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, Ohio, Iowa, areas where the Democratic Party has shown us in 2018 that they may be able to do well in the popular vote, but they still aren't able to overcome the gerrymandered districts there. And it looks as if the Republican Party is going to be able to continue that for the next 10 years. Now, for the Democratic Party, they also have some gerrymanders on their side in my home state of Maryland, one of the most gerrymandered states. Despite Republicans taking up roughly 1/3 of the vote in this state, they only have 1 out of the 8 House districts. It looks as if the Democratic Party does have an opportunity to make it a total of 8 Democratic districts. Obviously, that would be a very large gerrymander, but that's something that could actually happen. In Massachusetts, there are no Republican state representatives. That's because of gerrymandering, but it is up to complete Democratic control because of supermajority. So looking at the map, yes, Democrats are able to do it, but the Republican Party has much more power in terms of the states that they hold. Much more power in terms of the states that they hold just based off population alone, especially in prime targets for the Democratic Party. So based off redistricting alone, the Democratic Party could end up losing the United States House of Representatives just with plain redistricting, applying it to the 2020 presidential, Trump versus Biden districts. So when you're looking at some of these House districts, obviously they are pretty strangely drawn. We're going to look at Maryland really briefly, even though it's not a swing state. I want to show you exactly what's going to happen following this election year. Entering into 2022, we will see a new House of Representatives map, and you're likely to see even more partisan districts than the ones I'm showing you right now. I mean, there is this 3rd congressional district that is, look at the way it's drawn. That's insane. When you're looking at my congressional district, Maryland's 5th, it doesn't look that bad, but it's intentionally breaking in parts of my county, Prince George's County, in order to get the rest of Maryland and try to make it more bluer than it actually is. Because when you actually end up going, I don't believe that we have a county-wide map, but if we did, you would notice and you would see exactly why this is done. And it's not just done here. It's done on both sides, but it's something that won't be avoided for 2022. And given that the Republican Party has pretty significant control over where the state legislatures actually go in some of these states, well, if I was a Democrat, I would be very worried about the results of the redistricting, which means that just based off redistricting alone, the House could be entirely lost. But the Senate is a different story. The Senate isn't easily lost because it is a statewide thing. It all depends on turnout in the midterm election. So if the Democrats are able to drive up turnout the same way they were able to in the regular election, in the runoff election, well, then maybe they should be more confident. But after the Democratic Party, didn't necessarily win a lot of these toss-up states: Montana, Kansas, North Carolina, South Carolina, Maine, which was a shocker, Iowa. A lot of these toss-up races, well, they shouldn't exactly put all their faith in winning the Senate in 2022, but I think it's actually more likely than the United States House of Representatives, given that the Democrats will have 1 secure seat in the state of Georgia. They already have one in Arizona. The races that are up in 2022 aren't exactly the most competitive races for the Democratic Party. Now, maybe New Hampshire could be competitive depending on who decides to run. Raphael Warnock's race is always going to be competitive. Pennsylvania and Wisconsin are flips for right now, but the Democrats have made inroads in those states in midterm years. It's possible they do it in 2022. Pat Toomey has been a very firm opponent of President Trump. If the Republicans nominate someone who's very much Trump-esque, who has clung on to Donald Trump, well, it's possible the Democrats do well there. Ron Johnson went into Congress with the full intention of voting against the election results nationwide in Pennsylvania and Arizona, but looking at Wisconsin, well, the voters there may tell Ron Johnson to go home if they believe that he was part of the incited group that really pushed the entire Capitol insurrection, and that's something that could really drag down a number of Republicans in 2022, even if they weren't directly involved. If they endorsed President Trump, if they encouraged him on, if they said the election was rigged, I can imagine how easy those attack ads would pour out by the Democratic Party. Colorado, I don't think Democrats should be worried about. Nevada, maybe. Arizona, a little bit more. But looking at these competitive races, these are all territories where the Democratic Party was able to win before, and in 2022, they could do it again. Because in 2018, what we saw was the Republican Party able to win in states that they won on the presidential level. Now, not to say any of those states are nearly as partisan as North Dakota, Missouri, and Indiana, but those states were actually pretty competitive. But I do think that if the Democratic Party is able to tap into a very similar base as 2022, well, then maybe Wisconsin, Pennsylvania could go blue on the Senate level. Maybe Colorado, Arizona, Nevada, New Hampshire would remain Democratic states, Georgia included, which actually isn't too far-fetched, because the Democratic Party could pick up seats just through Wisconsin or Pennsylvania. These are the only states that I'm currently characterizing as flips for the Democratic Party. Nobody's saying that they can't win North Carolina. There are some people saying they can't win Florida, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's entirely out of reach. I can guarantee you there's going to be a Democrat who tries to contest the state against Marco Rubio or even Ivanka Trump. We don't know yet. But looking at the Senate elections in 2018, even in what seemingly was a Democratic wave year, which actually it was a Democratic wave year, the Republicans were still able to pick up states because of partisanship, because of polarization from the previous presidential election. And, like I had mentioned, these states aren't exactly as solid for the Democratic Party as those states were for the Republican Party, but anything's really possible. I mean, if Florida defied all expectations, nothing's saying Pennsylvania and Wisconsin can't. Lieutenant Governor Fetterman in the state of Pennsylvania is deciding more than likely to run. I mean, it's been pretty much been filed. He's made tweets about it, so it's going to happen. He's someone who could win in that state. If Ron Johnson chooses not to run in the state of Wisconsin, well, that could be a Democratic pickup. Richard Burr has already announced he's not running for re-election, so that could be a pickup for the Democrats. If Raphael Warnock maintains a powerful image in terms of popularity, in terms of continuing a Biden/Obama, really, type of legacy, well, that could be something the Democratic Party is able to use to their advantage and win that race. If Mark Kelley can remain popular as he was, he could win that Senate race. I don't think Colorado and Nevada are going to be states that are going to be too heavily contested. They could be, but the Democratic Party right now, I would say, would have the advantage, and all of the states have already characterized as blue. But in the House of Representatives, I think it's a different story. I think, combined with the overall redistricting committees that are going to be taking place, Democratic control not being as much as Republican control, it's going to be very difficult to counteract the amount of Republican changes in the House districts, enough so that just the right amount of Republican voters are in a certain district enough that these districts flip over to the Democrats with just the same exact technical constituents, just redrawn district borders in order to make it more favorable for the GOP. So I think the Democrats could lose the House directly just through redistricting alone, but the Senate, it will be a lot more trickier for the Democrats to actually lose in 2022. I'm not going to say this is the Democratic Party's race to lose, because they are not the incumbent party, and also the Senate map isn't exactly super favorable as it was for Republicans in 2018, and they expanded off that. But looking at 2022, the Democrats really could do everything in their power to retain control of the United States Senate and possibly even gain seats the same way the Republicans did in 2018. So it's not entirely out of the question. The Democrats could do it. They could lose the House. They could win the Senate. It's not something that's commonly done in terms of gaining seats in the Senate and also losing seats in the House, losing control of the House. But stranger things have happened. It's possible. Anything's really possible. It really all comes down to candidate quality and the popularity of President Biden. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my post-2020 election videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.